So have you seen Game of Thrones? Did you watch the...
I don't have HBO.
Oh.
I know, right? It's like embarrassing. I feel like it's like a personal failing that I have that I don't have HBO.
I think much to the annoyance of our friends, we talked Game of Thrones when we were both reading the books at the same time, right?
Right.
And then we like
right through. Wasn't there some emergency that we read? I remember reading Game of Thrones like through some disaster. I can't remember. But
I think it was the end of Irene, maybe Hurricane Irene.
Right, and my brain was not on it at all. My brain was like in Westeros.
Right.
That entire time.
That was a good. Yeah. So the new season started last week. It's really good. I may have to give you my HBO password.
Really? Could you? I hear that they like that. They really love that when you do that.
You know what they've said? Like they don't care because it's like. Actually, I don't know why they don't care. You would think they would care because it's people.
It's like a branding thing.
Yeah.
My wife, when I was reading those books, she gave me little tags. Like when I needed a night just to read Game of Thrones, she gave me like 5 coupons for like a mockery-free night of reading Game of Thrones. And any other time I would read it and she would make fun.
Little does she know that now it's cool.
I know, right? Everybody loves it now. But we don't love...
what do you don't know? Well,
the Ultimate Warrior died.
Yeah. Did you... Now, you and I... Listeners probably don't know this. Yeah. We share a common love of 1990s Christian contemporary music.
Why would you say that on the podcast?
Why not?
There are like 20
awesome.
people that know that now that didn't know that before.
Mitch and I, when we first met, started bonding over our love for 90s Christian contemporary music.
That's right.
CCM, DC Talk, Michael W. Smith. The list goes on and on. Newsboys, Altar Boys, All Boys.
We were cool.
All sorts of boys. But so... Wrestling, you never were into 90s wrestling?
No, I never. I couldn't understand. Here's the thing. It was like I couldn't figure out, is it bad fighting or is it bad theater? It's one of those two things, and I couldn't figure out which one it was.
You were a very advanced junior high boy then, because for me in junior high, seeing it, I was just like, oh, this is awesome. Look at these guys, these characters. But anyway, Ultimate Warrior died, so he was one of my faves.
Toast.
Let's pour some out.
That's right.
Ultimate Warrior. All right, so what else? We could spend the whole episode talking about Game of Thrones and Christian music.
That's right, with a little wrestling thrown in.
Yeah,
but we got so much to do. We got a lot of news rundowns. We're gonna dig into the West Virginia chemical spill that happened. We're gonna do a full-on after-action report for that.
We're gonna talk about the earthquakes and happening in Southern California and Chile. And what else are we going to talk about?
You found this amazing thing, Deadspin, How Hollywood Destroyed America.
Yes.
So we're going to dive into lots of fictional disasters and talk about them, which is going to be awesome.
Yep, that'll be fun. And we're going to talk about the American Red Cross consequences of disaster planning. It's an interesting blog article.
And here's what we're going to do while we do that. We're going to, number 1, try not to cry about Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah.
And number 2, try not to get ourselves killed by any passing like ogres or White Walkers or any of that stuff.
Right. And we're going to try to not make Tonks the dog bark this episode.
All right. Because this is Dukes of Hazzards. All right. I'm up. First news. We're news rundown. I got to talk about this because this it hurt me personally. This news. So Tamiflu. Tamiflu is a drug that the UK stockpiled. The US stockpiled a lot of it in the event of a pandemic because the idea is that Tamiflu is an antiviral and it slows the progression of illness and in symptoms faster and all that stuff. So a report came out from The Guardian today that the makers of Tamiflu, Roche Chemicals, they never released the full findings from the studies getting the drug approved. When you release the full findings of the studies, the approval of Tamiflu was based on a partial result in 1 out of 10 studies. And even that partial result said that the only benefit to Tamiflu was that it decreased symptoms by a half day, which would not be enough to be effective in a pandemic.
Oh, my God. I mean, this is just me hitting my hand to my forehead. Like, they didn't release it. Like, what? How does this happen?
Well, they don't have to, right? When you get approved, the approval process is a secret process.
Yeah.
And so you never have to release that stuff. They only released it because organizations have been badgering them for sort of years and years and years.
Yeah.
So the UK, people are protesting that the UK spend all of their kind of preparedness funding on stockpiling this drug, which of course is in the Strategic National Stockpile here in the US as well.
It's like if the public health warrior had a tool belt on, Tamiflu would be in the right hip holster.
Ooh, that's
Mount
right.
up.
Absolutely.
And to hear this is really this is unfortunate. It makes me think of how people, when they are sick, when they have problems, mental health problems, they want a fix. They want, the doctor to prescribe something. And that's why you have over prescription of, antibiotics and things like that. Just people need some fix. And so you wonder if that was kind of the evolution of Tamiflu. It was like, well, it doesn't really do much, but it's something we can give the people if they come down with flu.
It's the thing about stockpiling, right? This is the cruel thing about a pandemic planning. The planning assumption for a pandemic is that you're not going to have a vaccine for a significant amount of time. Although they've done great work with the H7N9 stuff, there are lots of vaccine candidates happening for multiple strains of influenza right now. But Tamiflu was always supposed to be the thing that got you through, the thing that got you through until that happens. And so, to me, first you got to verify this. You've got to check it out, make sure that this is not, those Brits. They scare easy over there. You want to make sure the science is sound.
Right.
But you want to make sure pan flu planning is focused on voluntary isolation. You know what I mean? The messaging, the other things that will really help until you can get vaccination, bring that to bear a little later on.
Yeah, man, that's an interesting article. The Guardian, man, they have some good public health reporters. I feel like they're always breaking really interesting, either emergency management, mainly public health news.
Yeah, it's because Britain invented cleanliness.
Yeah, that's right, and politeness. Another story, this one coming from Eric Holthaus as a Twitter feed. He's an amazing meteorologist that really made a name for himself during Hurricane Sandy, chronicling Sandy coming into New York City. And now he writes for The Slate and a couple other websites. But he posted this article that heat waves now kill more people in the U.S. each year than hurricanes, tornadoes, lightning, and floods combined. Which, if you're an emergency manager, you've heard stories like this probably every year, right? Like, we know heat waves kill a lot of people. There was the amazing book about the Chicago heat wave.
I'm gonna quote that book now.
Okay, go for it. Yeah, that was my segue.
This is Kleinenberg. Heat wave social autopsy of I said that wrong. I can't pronounce the word autopsy anymore. Of disaster in Chicago. We've known about heat waves for a long time, right? But for some reason, it's been this overlooked thing. And this is, to me, the most fascinating part of this. So 188 Chicagoans died during this heat wave.
And what year was this?
This was nine. I don't know.
Oh, sorry. No, keep going.
Nine in the mid 95.
Okay.
There we go. And what happened was, even before 95, people knew this was a threat. The way that the city found out about this was through the emergency departments. So the fire department, in an interview Kleinenberg did, said this: probably the first person to discover there was a heat emergency was an emergency medical services supervisor, so an EMS guy, because they heard this from several different teams. This is what he says: I was listening to the scanners, and they were saying, sorry, there's no ambulance available. Sorry, there's no ambulance available. Sorry, there's no ambulance available. And the paramedics were saying, hey, we've got another DOA. We've got another DOA. Here, we've got another DOA. And you hear it's going to be a few hours before we can get a wagon over there. And then the last one is, yeah, we're at the medical examiners and we're 17th in line.
That's amazing. So the way they found out that people were dying from this heat wave was through basically the EMS.
Yeah, ground up. They didn't have a syndromic surveillance system.
Right.
And so it took that long. It took these 17 folks in line at the medical examiner's office for it to trickle up that there was a problem for this, obviously really severe condition.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I feel like heat waves, they're just not sexy disasters, and that's horrible to say that, but I just feel like they're not ever given the importance that they need to be given, right? Or very rarely, I should say. Maybe in some cities.
No, I think that's right. And the other thing is they're contextual, right? A heat wave in Miami is much different than a heat wave in a northeastern city.
Right.
Like a blizzard in Miami would be a total disaster.
Yeah.
But a heat wave there, people are in some sense used to. They're like acclimatized to it.
And also like an early heat wave in the season, right, is much worse than one that has had, 3 weeks of hottish weather.
And it's about one of the elements of a disaster is expectation. If you expect it, then it's less disastrous. But if it startles you, then you're done.
So look at those risk assessments, and don't forget about our friend, the heat wave.
That's right. Yeah, that's the other. It's not in any of the Homeland Security planning scenarios that I know of. It always just kind of, it's like off the radar.
Right.
It's like the little redheaded stepchild. I don't think I can of the disasters.
Right.
It's the hot-headed step. So it opened a couple of weeks ago.
No.
NOAA.
Noah.
Noah.
Wow.
I
Yeah,
know,
that's
right. Russell
yeah.
Crowe, biblical patriarch.
The first emergency manager.
That's right.
Noah.
But and so we're gonna review that on the podcast, but neither one of us have seen it.
I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
We both want to see it.
I've seen the trailer like 50 times.
I have seen the trailer. Yeah.
And but I heard in the UK on Dark Horizons they reported that screening of Noah it actually flooded.
That is hilarious.
I know, right? And it's because the ice machine in the theater broke. Flooded.
Oh, it wasn't like a storm.
The ice machine somehow flooded the theater. It was, and I think I see the hand of God in that. They really reached down and flooded, the whole place.
Yeah, that's great.
They floated out on one of those little popcorn boxes. Out of there.
So we'll see. We'll both watch Noah one of these days and talk about it from an emergency management perspective. So also in the news, there's been a lot of small earthquakes in California. A big one in Chile, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but. A lot of people are wondering if these smaller earthquakes are pointing to a larger earthquake, a stronger earthquake coming. And we came across an article in Oregon Live magazine, the Oregonian magazine, actually. And scientists are saying it does not, a resounding no, it does not point that bigger earthquakes are coming. That it only means that this is a normal part of earthquake activity that happens. It's a normal fluctuation, and it doesn't predict a bigger one coming.
Which is not necessarily awesome that these things, it's just normal that they happen. The one off Chile was 8.2 magnitude, which is pretty severe, and it caused a tsunami, about 7 foot tsunami that hit the coast there. One of the things that was notable about it, obviously there have been severe earthquakes there before. To me, funny planning assumption for earthquakes, there always seems to be a prison break. In this case, 300 prisoners escaped from a women's prison nearby. So every earthquake, there's always like a wall that collapses and people run out of prison.
Right.
So you should add that to your earthquake plan.
That happened in the Bible. Paul was and his friend were in prison.
Right, but that was an angel. Was it an earthquake?
Yeah, well, I think an angel
caused the earthquake,
and they ran out.
This is like a deeply bibiblical episode.
Wow, yeah.
We've got Noah.
Should we have opened in prayer? Maybe we'll close in prayer.
That's a better way to do that. Yeah. We should have brought your guitar.
Lead some Christian music. What else was I going to say about the earthquakes? They are, I can't remember.
I don't think anything. Those are the best segues. The best segues are really sudden segues.
That's right. Some blaring music.
We're done talking.
Your ears.
All right. So we're going to dig into the chemical spill in West Virginia a little bit to after action that report. And it's a bad chemical incident when Erin Brockovich was there.
Right.
She was there a couple of months ago studying the effects of it. So I'm going to just break it down a little bit first off because this is a fascinating story to me.
Go for it.
So thanks. I'm breaking it. Could you give me a little beatbox in the background? Just north of Charleston, west.
We got to get on the same beat. We'll practice that.
Yeah, we'll work on that a little bit. So it all starts, as everything does, with a little company called Freedom Industries, and it has to be called Freedom Industries.
Right.
And they had a chemical that they were stored called MCHM, and the reason it's a bad chemical is because you use it to clean coal. Like when you take coal out of the ground and you clean it, what you use is MCHM.
That's got to be a serious chemical.
Right, I know. You're not messing around when you're doing that. And so what happened in this case was, it's January 9th. It's about 8 o'clock in the morning. People are waking up. And a lot of this that I'm going to tell is based on the reporting of this guy, Ken Ward, at the Charleston Gazette, who's a great reporter that I've been following. And so it's in the morning. People start smelling this licorice odor, right? And I mean, I love licorice, right? And you're like, it's candy. I love it. It's good. But they're annoyed by it. And so they call 911 and they call the Department of Environmental Protection in West Virginia.
Right. Send
2 guys out. 2 guys who've smelled it before. They think they know where it's coming from. And they go to this place, Freedom Industries. And so they go there, they check it out. The guys say, well, there's no problem. And they ask to see the grounds. So they walk through the grounds. And they have a big tanker of this stuff. And they notice that it's leaking, It's caused this 400 square foot pool, about 3 foot, 4 foot deep pool of chemical. And there's a 4 foot wide creek of it that's going into the Elk River, which is a major river in West Virginia, and it feeds into Charleston. And about 5 miles down from this feeding point is the main intake for the water system that covers 300 square miles around there and covers Charleston, West Virginia. So that's the incident. A couple things happen that I think are important from an emergency management perspective, right? Because these things never happen in a linear way. They go off course.
Right.
So the guys call it in. They fine the guys for a violation of their permit. And the first messaging that comes out that morning is everything's fine. Like, you smell this odor, but nothing's bad about it. But then what starts happening is a series of hospitalizations. People start going in for burning eyes. They have nausea. They have all these symptoms. And so about 5 o'clock that afternoon, I think it's a Thursday, the governor issues a do not use the water statement. Don't use it for anything. You can put out fires with it, and that's it.
Right.
For it. Shuts down the entire thing completely. Send for FEMA for bottled water. That's what they do. 3 days
They also declare a disaster, right? The governor
Right.
declares a disaster.
Yeah, exactly.
For these counties.
And then so then they put in a mapping system, and on Monday of that week they announce, okay, here's the state, here's the blue parts. The blue parts are where the water we think is okay. You flush out the system in your area. Red parts are where it's still undrinkable. And a state legislator in Charleston. Is this too much? Am I telling too much story?
I don't think so.
I think
hey, we're all emergency managers, public health people. We like the details.
I'm geeking out about this because I think it's important in terms of how you structure this stuff.
No.
So a legislator sees the map. In the blue part, she's staying in a hotel. She's in the blue part of the map. So she showers. She winds up with burning eyes and a sinus condition and goes to the emergency room for 5 days.
Oh, wow.
Because she was in the blue part, but the hotel hadn't flushed out its water. And so over the next week of time, I mean, a full week since the incident happened, different parts of the state gradually become blue and people flush their pipes out.
Yeah.
But it's a really slow process.
And then also, I don't know if I'm jumping ahead on this, but at some point, the CDC, after they said the water was safe, the CDC came out with a recommendation for pregnant women should not drink the water,
Wednesday,
right?
6 days after it. So this is my perspective, okay? And I don't know these guys at all, but I'm an emergency manager in West Virginia.
Yeah.
I've structured this thing. I've gotten out my messaging. My messaging is, okay, I'm gradually turning the state blue. It's becoming drinkable.
Right.
I think they were about 65% done turning the state blue. Suddenly, the CDC and the state health department come out with a statement that says, out of an abundance of caution, pregnant women should not drink the water.
Right.
But, you know, what does that mean, out of an abundance of caution?
Right.
People are going to hear pregnant women, should not drink the water.
Shouldn't drink the water. And then, the pregnant women that have been drinking the water because this guidance didn't come out, they're freaking out at this point.
Absolutely. And so it talks about sort of linked city, state, and federal responses, really important. Right, agreeing on consistent messaging is important.
Right.
And the other part is that, the thing about this chemical is the material safety data sheet for the chemical doesn't have any actual data on it in terms of when it's safe. There's no safe standard for it in water.
Well, that's the interesting thing about the Rolling Stone article that we'll post on our website, but there's been very few studies on the effect that MCHM has on people.
What I say in my brain, my cat has measles.
Oh, that's a good.
That's my little mnemonic device for it.
One.
So if you want to remember it that way.
Yeah, that's really good. There's just, but the thing the article said, there's been very few studies on its effect in humans. There's been a few studies on live rats, but it's hard to make that applicable to humans, and so they don't really know how it's going to affect them.
This was how Ken Ward told the story on an episode of Fresh Air, because they always tell everything on Fresh Air.
Right,
you
right.
go on Fresh Air and you're giving your life story away. And he said that the general of the National Guard, they were trying to say what's safe, what's a safe level for this chemical, and they said, when can people drink the water? And the general of the National Guard, who's not a health guy, right? He said, look, we're not going to let people drink until it gets to 1 part per million in the water, because the CDC says it's safe to drink then. But the CDC never said that. Right? And
so where did they get that number?
Well, he got it from the CDC, but the CDC hadn't released it. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, I see.
The CDC hadn't made it part of their messaging.
Gotcha.
So this reporter, Ken Ward, he goes to the CDC and he says, where did that number come from? And in his account, and I can't verify this. He says the CDC said, well, you wouldn't understand,
Oh gosh.
and so, so we're not going to go into all the science stuff because you're not going to get it.
Right.
Which
trust us, we're the government.
Right. Which I think ticks the guy off.
Yeah, sure.
And he goes kind of on a crusade.
Yeah. It's almost, like public messaging is such an important component of every disaster, and it's so hard to get right 100% of the time, which you have to do.
Right.
It's amazing to me that agencies don't literally drill this every week. States, feds, local jurisdictions don't get on an hour-long conference call. Maybe some places do every week and just talk through a scenario, get to know people. You know what I mean? It's just so...
What's the guy? So there are two guys. There's Peter Sandman and there's Vince Cavello. One of them, and I can't remember which one, has this single overriding communications objective principle that before you go out, you say, here's your single objective.
Right.
And basically you have 27 words, I think.
Right.
So you have a third of a tweet or something to get it right and get it out there.
Yeah.
But here's the last part of the story, because I think the other part of this is interesting to me from an emergency management perspective is the logistics. So after it was declared a disaster area, FEMA starts sending them bottled water. Now, as the state turns blue, FEMA says, well, you don't so much need the bottled water anymore.
Right. And the declaration's over at this point, right?
Well,
Are we getting close to being over?
I think it was getting close to being over. And then the governor writes FEMA a letter that Wednesday, about the time the CDC puts out the pregnant women alert.
Yeah.
And in the letter the governor writes, again, this is from Ken Ward reporting, he says the public has lost their trust in the water system. And basically, we don't know when they're going to get the trust back. And we need the water until the public trusts the water system again. We need you to keep sending us the bottled water until the public trusts us.
In which they respond probably, you're not going to get the trust back as long as we're delivering water. Right?
Exactly. It's like
that sort of thing.
It's a chicken and an egg thing.
Yeah.
But it's this decision of, if you're a logistician, from that perspective, I'm thinking, how long do I have to keep sending this water?
Yeah, right.
When are they going to trust me again?
Yeah. And the Rolling Stone article also does a good job. You can tell this is the only article I read about it with this story. It was a really good. Did a good job of profiling the people and what they have to go through when they're not using tap water, and how we take for granted the convenience of water. Like, some people are driving 30 miles to get 5-gallon jug of water to drive it back to their house, and washing dishes. I mean, bathing, cooking. I mean, they were having to use bottled water for all this, and it's a real pain.
And so CDC, so I did some checking today to kind of see where this was.
Yeah.
And what is it? It's April 10th that we're recording this on. CDC is doing a study of the health effects of it. Hasn't completed the study yet. Side note, okay, one other important emergency management principle. They didn't release, last week we were talking about the mudslide. And one of the great things they did were the consistent updating of data as they got it in.
Right.
So in this case, West Virginia didn't release updated casualty counts every day. They didn't have a systematic way of doing it. So I would just advocate to anybody that's listening, updated patient counts is really important. It's
got to be tough in something like this, though, because you can't probably automatically assign a death to this chemical, right?
That's true.
Because it's not clear that chemical caused it.
That's a good point.
And one of the things we were talking about earlier that you mentioned was it's important to say, they should say it's as safe, the water is as safe as it was before the incident, right? So you can't
they can't actually say the water's safe.
Right. It's as safe as it was before.
But this is what I was going to say, is that it turns out it's not. As of last week, I think April 3rd, people are reporting this licorice scent in the water, and they tested they've done random samples, and the water still has MCHM in it.
Yeah.
Although it's at a low concentration.
And it might have been in it beforehand.
Well,
I mean, they
called
this valley where this river goes through Chemical Valley because there were so many plants up and down it. This kind of reminds me of, my grandparents lived in West Texas, which is cotton farming, oil. And when if
you're listening, don't worry. You've never been there.
Yeah, right. And growing up, when we would go and visit I remembered at my grandparents' house, all the cups, all the glasses were coated in this mineral deposit. Like the clear glasses, right, had this coating of white, like crystal on the bottom of it. And the water just tasted like you were drinking almost like salt water. And it was just because water was so rare out there. It was, all cotton farms with fertilizer. Cotton's one of the most fertilized crops. Showering was like, it was like scrubbing sandpaper. You're like showering with sand. But the water was like really, really bad. And I wondered, comparing water sources across jurisdictions, how clean that West Texas water is compared to something like this.
Right. I mean, I guess that's the CDC hasn't released their study. The health department is just starting as of last week. They just started a study on the human impact of it.
Wow.
So we'll have to come back and look at it. Goes back to this rule about recovery, right? The standard rule of thumb for recovery is 1 day of disaster, 10 days of response, 100 days of recovery, and 1,000 days of restoration. So I can't actually remember the rule.
Right. So it'll be a while before we update on this story. Painfully loud, that music in my ears.
Oh my God, I'm really looking forward to the next segment. I can't hear anything, but I'm really looking forward to this.
Okay, so one of our favorite websites, Deadspin, has a great post called How Hollywood Has Destroyed America. And it's basically, that's it. It's every disaster film, every movie, every TV show that has a disaster and how it's destroyed. And they break it down with alien attacks, space rocks, pandemics, superhero battles, natural disasters, Sharknadoes, basically every disaster.
Have there been more than one
There's only been one Sharknado,
okay, good.
But I think there's other planned.
New York has been destroyed by monsters 9 times.
Yeah, in New York, no surprise, leads the way with, I think, 36 times it's been destroyed.
That's right.
So LA comes in second.
Nobody beats us in terms of discussion.
New York.
Destruction.
We're the best at everything.
Including getting ourselves blown up.
Right, including dying horrible deaths. So it does some great movies, and so this got us thinking about disaster movies.
Because here's the thing about disaster movies: they rarely use ICS. Have you ever noticed this? Like,
what a boring, horrible movie that would be.
Right? Sit rep. Give me a sit
let's
rep.
break up into the.
I don't know why they don't, because I was thinking about this, and what started me thinking about it was I was thinking about Jaws.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
And the thing about Jaws is
logistics.
That's right, ICS. They could get you a bigger boat.
They could.
That's what they're
just
for.
Just use ICS.
That's
guys.
right. You would have gotten a bigger boat. You would have much less of a casualty count in that movie.
You would have had a safety vest with that boat.
That's right.
Proper life-saving equipment with it.
You would have had MREs.
Yep.
Those are very important to go with the boat. You would have had a licensed Coast Guard skipper.
You would have a shark SME to go with you to tell you about the shark.
Oh, that's right. No, you would have. And probably you would have had an oceanographer to guide you on the way. It would have cost the federal government something like $10 million. Your little boating expedition.
Exactly, but it's a presidentially declared disaster. You'll get reimbursed.
Absolutely.
Keep your receipts.
Yeah, you could have just brought in a professional negotiator to just negotiate with the shark.
You would have gotten a sign-in sheet to get on the boat.
Oh, look at this.
That you can turn in for proof that the boat meeting happened.
Yeah, you could have reimbursed yourself for all the dry cleaning for the blood spatter on your clothes after the sharking expedition.
But no food. No food. We can't. No, the food's not covered. We can't.
Oh.
We can't provide food on the boat.
You just eat the shark.
Oh, that's true. There you go.
Yeah, there are so many of these things.
So many great movies.
I was thinking about this in terms of ICS, because I do think that, these disasters should use ICS. That's the stance I'm going to take. But here's the thing. In a crisis, right, what you always see is political leaders, they rely on their trusted relationships over a formal plan.
Right.
You know what I mean? You
in the movies, you're saying,
or
real life.
Well, in real life.
In real life, right?
And in the movies,
yeah,
kind of. Well, except sometimes what happens is your political leaders they actually turn into fighter pilots and they go out with drunk dudes to kill aliens.
All right, Mr. President, here we go. Paybacks a bitch, ain't it?
God, that movie was horrible.
Really? I love that movie.
Even at the time,
oh my God,
I was like, the president would not be in a fighter.
I think that's pilot. Totally true. Here's why I think
absolutely
that.
not.
No, here's what. This is going to be my segue into your Tommy Lee Jones reverie. I'm going to just set everybody up for that, right. Which is that in a disaster, when you have a real disaster and you have some kind of ICS implemented, whether it's military or other things, the chief executive becomes like an executive sponsor. So he has fewer on the ground responsibilities to do, right?
Right.
And I think in that case, if I'm a president and I'm not sure what else to do, I think what I want to be is I want to be a fighter pilot. Like if I were president, I would totally go.
It's what you want to do. It's not what you should do.
Well, okay. So you're saying you should be an executive sponsor. You should give policy directives to the incident command system.
Exactly. Stay out of the way.
All right. But here's the thing about an incident command is that people always think of it as this quasi-militaristic system.
Yeah.
Right. And that it doesn't work like that. ICS is about like radical coordination. You get all the stakeholders in a room together. You make sure you clearly assign tasks. But it's actually much less important to have one incident commander who's like running
dictating
everything,
orders.
Right. Because that can go, it can go horribly wrong.
And the way the reason it thinks like that is because it comes out of the fire system, right? And somewhat influenced at least by the military systems, I think.
Yeah.
But now with the system evolving and with a new generation of people who are much more into collaboration instead of command and control. Right?
Which is, it's sad that the major emergency manager represented in the movies that we've ever seen is Tommy Lee Jones in Volcano.
In Volcano.
It's a sunny day.
It takes a geological event to heat 1 million gallons of water for 12 hours.
What is a geological event?
What is a geological event?
I don't know.
So
What
this
is a
guy
geological
is the
event?
emergency manager of LA County, and he's like, "What's a geological event?"
Is he really? Is that LA County? Is that
Yeah.
where it takes place?
Yeah, I mean, the whole movie. It's like Emergency Operations Center. He's wearing a hat that says OEM.
This is a problem. This is why ICS, I think, has a bad name.
Leave your home. Somebody tell me what the hell is going on.
There's got to be something feeding this.
Somebody tell me what the hell is going on.
I say that as an emergency man. That's like the number one sentence.
This
that I
is
say.
a pretty good, realistic look.
No, I
man.
think that's right.
No.
I think that's right.
It is the only movie to feature the lead as an emergency manager, though. It's pretty hilarious.
Do you have a hat that says OEM on it?
No, I don't.
I don't know, but I guess at least in that movie,
I'm sure they exist, right?
Oh no, they do.
You know who wears an OEM shirt?
Oh,
The dad from Here Comes Honey Boo Boo.
What?
The TV show. You know the TV show, Here Comes Honey Boo?
No, it's from near my hometown.
Yeah,
It's
so
where they live.
my wonderful wife watches the show.
What?
And he's always wearing an emergency management shirt. It's the funniest thing.
Is it in New York City?
No.
It's like-
it's not. Yeah, no. It's his hometown, and I don't know where they are, Arkansas, Tennessee.
No, they're in Georgia.
Georgia.
I'm telling you, they're like 20 miles from like
Whatever,
where I grew
somewhere
up.
in the middle of the country.
Oh my God!
How
do
much of a
not
New
do
Yorker
that.
do I sound like?
Here's what I think.
I don't know where it is.
I think that just a little side note on Honey
Yeah.
Boo Boo's family. That is a smart reality TV show family. They're putting money away for college.
Yeah.
They have an upstanding emergency manager in the family.
Yeah.
I'm totally pro.
No, people say
Honey
they're
Boo
the
Boo.
most loving family, much more loving than some of the other like Kardashian shows, things like that. But yeah, he's the other spokesman for emergency management out there.
But my money is definitely on him over the Kardashians in any kind of emergency.
Do we have one more volcano clip?
Absolutely. And here's the
Okay.
thing. I think that this shows the learning process of an emergency manager in a disaster.
Gonna be defenseless. You don't like my plan? That's good. Give me another plan, but don't tell me we're backing out. We're gonna take this thing to the ocean.
That's right.
You don't like my plan?
Can happen.
We're gonna take this thing to the ocean.
You don't like my plan? Give me another. I gotta use that line in a meeting sometime.
I say that all the time. These are the two most common things
We're
I
gonna
say.
take it all to the ocean. Do
You
you
don't
take
like my
all of
plan? Give me another plan.
meeting facilitation by Tommy Lee Jones?
I do, but honestly, this is the God's honest truth, okay? I've totally heard people say that in disaster situations. Because what happens is you have in disasters, you have proactive people and you have like editorial people who are
Right.
reacting to plans.
Yeah.
And it takes time and energy to come up with a plan. And if you have to keep redoing it over and over in a disaster, then time's up, right? You've
Yeah,
lost.
right.
So that's the thing of sometimes you just have to fight for the plan, you
Yeah,
know? Like
right.
you may, you
Yeah.
don't like my plan.
Get a new one. Can you think of a better one?
That's right.
There's another great podcast, EM Talk, out there that did a episode just on volcano, and so
really?
yeah, check that out. It's pretty funny.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
Here's the other thing about ICS. I think that a lot of times in disaster movies, we don't have an incident commander. like something like, I mean, Deep Impact kind of does. There are a lot of these decentralized things where This Is the End is an example where people are falling apart all over the place.
Right.
And one of the things I love about disaster movies with an incident commander is that they get to make great speeches.
At the edge of our hope.
Like this is from Pacific Rim.
At the end of our time.
And you can tell it's dramatic because I can talk in between the pauses.
We have chosen not only to believe in ourselves, but in each other. Today there's not a man nor woman in here that shall stand alone.
Is he British?
Not today.
In this movie.
Today we face the monsters that are at our door and bring the fight to them. Today we are canceling the apocalypse.
Great.
That's our job. Slow clap.
Building.
We are canceling the every day. We're canceling the apocalypse.
I have never had an instant commander say a speech
Today,
like that ever.
We are canceling, but that's why. But this is the thing. To me,
The only speech I've ever heard an instant commander give is like, "Please remember, do not bring your big gulps into the emergency operations center. Please save your work."
so to me, this is the difference. It's the difference between an emergency manager and an incident commander, right? Because emergency managers often are really planning section people, right? Like the joke my wife always tells me about that I'm actually the butler Jarvis from the Avengers. Like that's really my job.
Right.
It's not a superhero. I'm the butler.
Right.
Because the incident commander, sort of uses that system to make decisions.
Right.
And I feel like you've got an incident commander when they can make that speech from Pacific Rim without people laughing them out of the room.
That's true. And Tommy Lee Jones made a lot of mistakes because he's the county emergency manager of LA, one of the biggest counties,
Right.
and he's like in turnout gear going through the subways investigating the volcano. So not what an instant commander should be doing.
What was that? Oh, so last point I wanted to make.
Consistent reports from witnesses to the effect that people who acted as though they were in a kind of trance were killing and eating their victims prompted authorities to examine the bodies of some of the victims. Medical authorities in Cumberland have concluded that in all cases, the killers are eating the flesh of the people they murdered.
This is from
What in the world is that from?
Night of the Living Dead.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I love that because public messaging is often like in disaster movies. Public messaging is terrible.
Right.
Like and this spoiler alert. So just if you haven't seen every movie ever, just turn off your podcast right now. But in The Mist, do you know the Stephen King movie?
Oh,
The
right,
Mist?
right, yeah.
Which I can't bring myself to watch it, but I know the plot of it because I like study it but can't see it. At the end of the movie, the father shoots his son, kills his son, because he thinks they're all going to die because of the monsters in the mist.
Right.
And then is about to kill himself when these army guys come up and like rescue him. And he has to like live with the fact that he killed his son for the rest of that. This is the ultimate downer, right?
Horrible.
But what I was thinking is if his PIO had only been as good as the dude from Night of the Living Dead, he would have survived that, right? If they had just if they just tweeted that stuff,
Maybe they
would've
were
been fine.
to make a case for the command and control over the collaboration. Maybe they had too much of a collaborative environment in their EOC in the Mist, and instead of a command and control. Because don't you I'm all for collaboration and planning, but when the S hits the fan, don't you need a leader to get out there, clear-headed, give clear orders, and have people implement the orders?
So here's the data shows. Okay, I'm going to go back to the mythical data.
The cloud, the data in the cloud.
The data in the cloud shows that what is important is command is less important than coordination. So what you need, though, clear task. This is the paradox, right? You need some kind of leader who will clearly assign people a task. Like you are the tweeter. You have to tell everybody that the mist is going to go away before they kill their sons. Right. That's like the clear task. But once that happens, you've got to stay out of the way for that to happen. And so I guess the difficulty is you need an empowering leader who will let people do their jobs. Because my view of the Mist, like in my head, what happens is there's a tweet somebody writes that's like, "We're coming to save you. Don't kill your family."
Yeah.
But it gets hung up in review. Like it gets hung up in like levels of review
process.
up the hierarchy.
Right.
And so it never gets out the door.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's the wrestle there.
So next we have a story from an American Red Cross blog called "The Unexpected Consequences of Disaster Planning," and this is just an interesting story that we ran across on the Red Cross's website. And the author talks about the complexity of issues in disaster planning that she ran across when she and her husband started talking about what they would do. They live in Southern California. These tremors are happening, so it causes them to think of like, oh, we should update our go bag and start doing a little more planning. They started to think through what would happen. They live in a small town. If she was at home and he was in the city, there's one road into their house. If that road was blocked off and he wasn't able to get home and communication systems were down, and it really sent them on this pretty complicated mental exercise of figuring out what they would do.
Right, because they need two go bags. They each have separate
right.
supplies, and they don't have communication, and they can't figure out like where to meet up because they don't have transportation.
Because the road is blocked. I think they had one car, so one of them's stuck there. And it just, to me, it was interesting because this is a challenge that a lot of planners will run into as they are given a pretty clear assignment. Write a X plan, write a pandemic plan, write a communications plan for blah, blah, blah. And as you get into the issues, you start to uncover this onion of layers of complexity and of challenges. And so, if it was tough for this couple in trying to, do family planning, imagine how complex it would be for a city, a county, a state, a federal agency.
Yeah, this guy, Lee Clark, wrote a great book, one of my favorite emergency management books. It's called it's one of my favorites. It's called Fantasy Documents. It's called Plans as Fantasy Documents or something like that. And it's about how people write plans to just basically feel better. And if they've written the plan, it's like a family.
You can point to it on the shelf. Right, there's my plan.
There it is. There's my plan. And then you feel this like good sense of like I did something real, you know. But it actually makes you less prepared in the emergency because you think you're prepared and then you're overconfident and then you don't know what you're doing.
It's like a false sense of security.
And I think that happens for families too.
Yeah.
I got a little personal story here. I'll just get a little real here.
Sure.
That we got an escape ladder for my daughter's bedroom upstairs. She lives on the second floor, and with instructions of if there's a fire or something, she should use that to get out.
Yeah.
But we've never drilled it because it's a little terrifying for my daughter to throw a ladder out the window and then climb down
out,
it.
Right.
But that's not real. You know what I mean? It's not real planning because she's never drilled it. And in a fire, she would be like terrified to throw this ladder out.
How do I get this out?
I know. So you need the preparedness cycle. You got to train for that stuff once it happens.
And also the other thing is, I mean, I can talk bad about executives because I'm not one, but executives, they've got a lot on their shoulders. They're dealing with multiple of issues. They naturally do not have the time to go into the details of this planning. So a lot of times they don't understand the complexity of issues or challenges that planners face. So I think, planners have another task to be able to communicate this complexity of issues of a lot of these things up the chain in a way that gets the message across. I guess it's why communication is so important for an emergency manager. Communication skills.
I was thinking about this. It struck me that this was a lot like the story of Shoreham, Long Island. I don't know if you know this story.
Yeah.
So Shoreham, Long Island in the 60s was going to, Lilco, which is Long Island Lighting Company, was going to build a nuclear power plant on Shoreham. And everybody was excited, it's going to be new power and it's going to be, cheapen our bills and stuff. And then 3 Mile Island happened. And people were skeptical about it. And the population didn't want to do it. And what happened was one of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission requirements was that if you're going to build a nuclear power plant there, you needed an evacuation plan for the community, right? And so Lilco thought, well, this is fine because the community evacuates every day. Like 600,000 people in that area go to New York City every day because they commute.
Yeah.
And so that's an evacuation
It's like
plan.
an evacuation, a daily evacuation.
So we're going to dig into it and what are the problems going to be? Like how
yeah.
complicated could it be?
Yeah.
And so they dig into it and the population's against them. And it comes down to this idea of getting the children out of school. Where do the children go when you get them out of school? So Long Island Lighting wrote this plan, and the plan was that all the parents are in New York City. This meltdown happens. The parents are not supposed to come get the kids. the parents are supposed to wait, and they're going to send in this fleet of private buses to go pick the kids up. And the private buses are going to pick the kids up and drive them all to the Nassau Coliseum, which is this Coliseum that's like halfway in between Shoreham and New York City.
Right.
And I was telling my daughters the story, and they were like, but you would come get us, right? And I was like, no, because the plan is that these buses would come get you.
Right.
And they're like, well, we're not going to get on the buses. You would come get us, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, no. So anyway, they wanted to try and drill this. This is the other level of complexity. And the city wouldn't play. Shoreham was like, we don't want this. We don't think you can evacuate us. We're not going to play in your drill.
Yeah, well, we're certainly not going to give our school children to participate in this.
Right, exactly. So you know what happened?
No.
This is my favorite part of the story. So the Nuclear Regulatory Commission told FEMA, they were like, well, Shoreham won't play. And FEMA was like, well, we'll be Shoreham. FEMA came in and pretended to be the local.
Like FEMA staff?
Yeah, they appointed somebody a mayor, and they appointed somebody to be the police chief, and they just came in and they were the exercise players. And what happened was some of the bus drivers got lost, and some of them went to the wrong place. And
the wrong Coliseum?
Right,
How many Coliseums
Well, they
are
drove
out?
in the wrong. I mean, Long Island's an island, right?
right?
And if you drive the wrong direction, you get stuck there.
Yeah.
And then some of them, I thought this rendezvous point was the final point, and let the kids off in a radiation zone or whatever. And so,
oh, this is the hot zone. Sorry, kids.
yeah. And so anyway, the city said, look, this is not a workable plan.
Yeah.
And so you shouldn't have a nuclear power plant here.
Wow.
And it actually so the Nuclear Regulatory Commission shut it down.
Wow.
After a loco spent $4 billion on this plan, and then it took them something like 15 years to dismantle it at a cost of another $400 million.
I mean, that's why you plan, right?
Well,
that's why you exercise.
Absolutely. And that's why in this case the planning was so much more complicated
Right.
than they thought. They thought it was, sign a little, get a little rubber stamp.
Sure,
and,
right.
we're
How
done.
complicated could it be? So what suggestions do you have for planners who are given a task, are struggling with that task, planning, they're they've got all this complexity in the issue they're dealing with. Meanwhile, you have executives that kind of look at this team of planners being like, what do they do all day? What are they planning for? Planners, what are they doing? How do planners communicate effectively up the chain to the executives to get across the complexity of issues?
I found that Bruichladdich is a good scotch. And I think
as a bribe,
you should start
you
there.
give that,
yeah,
or you
right.
drink it.
Drink a little. I think that here's the most important thing is when you're starting a project like that, I think planners often get the wrong assignment. Somebody will say to a planner, write me X tactical plan. You know what I mean?
We want to operationalize this plan.
Right, absolutely. Go write me a protocol about how people dodge trees when they fall down or something like that. And I think the planner's job is to look into that issue and first figure out what the real problem is. Right? It may be that, you
and
shouldn't
quickly, right? Don't take 6 months to do it. But
right. But at the same time, you want to do it fast, but you want to do it in open communication with partners. Yeah. You want to bring all the parks people in, and you want to say, what's the problem? And the problem may be the trees are in the wrong place, and people. I'm getting lost in this metaphor.
Right, we're solving the problem.
You don't want to have a power plan on Long Island in this, but but you want to get people together, and you want to look at the systems in the community and sort of say what's wrong in all of these things, so you can come back to your executive and say, look, I know you said X, the real problem is Y, and I think that we should do Z about it. Because my experience has been if you do that early and if you dig into the problem, then it's easier to do kind of real planning in a way that will be ultimately successful.
That's great. Yep. All right, so with all this talk about earthquakes and landslides, I just wanted to give a shout out to a friend of ours, Allison Litton, who wrote a firsthand account of a major earthquake she went through when she was a kid and hiking in China. And it's on the wheelhousereview.com. It's a 3-part series blog post. So the first 2 parts are up. So we don't know if she survives or not. No, I'm just kidding. We know if she survives because we're her friend.
She's not writing from beyond the grave.
Right. Yeah. No, she is alive. But it's a great firsthand account of living through a pretty major disaster, and it got me thinking if emergency management agencies should incorporate more real stories to their website. The website. I don't want to say PR, but just I feel like given the human element to these disasters, even after the fact, could be really powerful to help people to prepare for the next one.
I think that's really true, actually. Things like Dave Eggers' Zaytoon book,
Yeah.
or Sherry Fink's 5 Days at Memorial.
Even the, if you live in New York City, the TV commercials for New York Presbyterian, they have former patients of the hospital on there talking about how this doctor and this procedure saved my life at New York. I mean, those commercials are so powerful. When my wife was pregnant, she would like start bawling every time they came on. But things like that about how response planning, recovery changed lives.
Yeah, those are so real and they're grounded.
Yeah.
I just was reading The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt, which is a fictional book, but it has an account of bombing that happens at the Met, and then the way that people access the patient tracking hotline. Like they're calling into 311, they're trying to find victims, and just the mechanics of how that was working was really instructive to me. So I think both nonfiction and fictional accounts, when they're that specific, are really helpful.
And we do it for the big disasters, right? The Boston Marathon, but even the smaller ones, I think you could really have a great human perspective for those stories.
The other shout out we wanted to give was to our friend and colleague Sean O'Mara, who's recently left us for San Francisco.
Sean. He left for San Francisco with flowers in his auburn hair.
That's right. He really did. If you're going to...
That's
It's go west, young man. But he's doing a thing that you should explain.
Yeah, it's really cool. He sent this picture. He's doing a presentation titled EM or WWTLJD. What would Tommy Lee Jones do?
That's right. That's really apropos. Today has been all about God and Tommy Lee Jones. That says something.
Are they the same thing? I don't know. But it's really cool. I mean, they have a very progressive emergency management public health department out there. And so they're doing a presentation at the Rickshaw Stop. Wednesday, 4/16 at 7 p.m. The show starts at 8. So if you live in San Francisco or the area, go check it out. 155 Fell Street.
And if that's posted anywhere, I would actually really love to hear what that's about.
That would be a cool presentation. Yeah, I wonder if they'll record it. We'll have to reach out to them.
What we should do, we should get bracelets.
Maybe they'll have karaoke at that presentation at that bar. Probably not. San Francisco's too cool.
Karaoke?
Yeah, San Francisco's probably too cool for karaoke.
No, everybody loves karaoke.
Okay.
I miss it. I really think disaster karaoke is something we should bring in.
Probably so.
Okay. No.
Nope.
This is right. We should.
Are we wrapping it up? What are we talking?
And just making the wrap it up sign. It's awkward now because we don't know whether to close in prayer or not. But we're moving on to the credits.
Yeah, closing. So we'll update the blog with all the links to the articles that we mentioned. We'll try to update the blog sooner than 3 days before the next podcast. But please email us questions and suggestions for the show. What do you like? What do you not like? Do you have questions? We'll read your question on air. We won't use your name. If you don't want it, we'll keep it anonymous.
We may even think up another name for you if we can remember to do that.
We'll probably do that. Our email is hazardspodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at hazardspodcast. And our website is hazardspodcast.com.
That's right. And let us all hope that we can one day find an incident commander as good as Idris Elba in Pacific Rim and better than Tommy Lee Jones.
Tommy Lee Jones.
The mics are still on.
As I'm complimenting ourselves.
We were awesome.
Fun, huh?
It was so good.
Our 12 listeners are
Bye.